All right, welcome. We're in the chakra series still. If you caught me last week, I told you I was opening up a series of the chakra system so that you could better understand how to reach and live from that higher place of consciousness. So the chakra system, all of our energy centers give us every single answer we could possibly need. So if you were with me last week when we learned how to ground and stabilize and deepen into the earth, today we're learning how to let go and move with the flow. And I want to remind you that we talked about how these systems worked off of each other. So we're not letting go of the grounding. We're not letting go of all of the things we rooted into. In fact, what we rooted into is going to form the way that we flow and let go and surrender. Every single one of these chakras depends on the one below it. So if you operate from these higher chakras, but you haven't done the work down in your foundational ones, these ones are going to be distorted and messy. So as we work from the ground up, you're going to have an opportunity with each new level that you learn to go back to every single chakra before that and ask yourself, what was I rooted into that formed that belief? Or today, what did I feel or perceive about that shaped the way of me being, or that shaped the way of my reality now? So they all build off of one another. And I want you to utilize that knowing as we move through this series, and you can go through this whole system once with me and watch what unravels. So I'm first going to start with all of the very generic information. So if you have no baseline around the chakra system at all, then you have this information. So the element of this is water. The name is the Svadhisthana, which means sweetness. The purpose of the second chakra is movement and connection. Some of the issues that come with it are sensations, emotions, sexuality, desire, your need for pleasure. The color is orange. The location is your lower abdomen or your sacral plexus. So I call this my space of creation. If you're gendered female, your womb space. If you're gendered male, this place underneath your belly button to the top of your pelvic bone. There's a nice little bowl there. Our space of creation is where our second chakra is held. And if you remember from last week, I talked about how all of your chakras are like little pieces of your hard drive, but they can only collect data on the information that they're in charge of. So everything we learned in the root chakra last week is what your root chakra is taking information in on. Your second chakra is taking information on all of the things I've been mentioning: sensations, emotions, sexuality, desire, need, pleasure, and it's all housed here. Okay. The identity of this chakra is emotional. The orientation is self-gratification, and the demon is guilt. This develops between 6 months and 2 years. And it's your ability to explore the world through your senses, to be able to, this is when the child begins to taste all the things, to touch all the things, to rub the things in their hand. It's when they begin to walk. So locomotion, movement, all of these things are part of the second chakra. So you can also notice if you in that period, 6 months to 2 years, weren't doing some of these things, weren't feeling around, weren't crawling around, maybe you were stuffed in a playpen all day, your second chakra might be a little bit out of whack. Okay, the basic rights are to feel and have pleasure. So this is when we aren't numb to the world. We get to feel and experience everything. And when our second chakra is aligned, because so is our first, you're graceful. You have graceful movement, emotional intelligence. You have the ability to experience pleasure, nurturance of self. You're able to nurture others. You have healthy boundaries, right? You have a deep sense of self on a sensate level. Some of the things that can lead to distortions here. So again, from that developmental age, we're collecting all of this data on how we show up, on how we perceive, on how we feel. So there's going to be some trigger words coming up. If there was any sort of sexual abuse, whether it was covert or overt, any sort of emotional abuse, volatile situations, neglect, rejection from your parents, denial of your needs, lack of mirroring because they didn't have the capacity, your emotional manipulation, overuse of playpens, normal movement was restricted. If you grew up in a religion or an organization that was very anti-pleasure and was very had like severe restrictions on the things you couldn't do, if your family hasn't dealt with their own issues around sexuality, all of these things could impact your second chakra. So noticing, looking, asking yourself where and what's coming up as I say these things, just take note. It doesn't have to be this big thing you figure out, but it can be this sense of awareness where, again, we go back and we ask that question, what am I rooted into around this belief or sensation that's coming up? So like I said last week, if you have your chakra if it's not balanced, it's either huge and it's taking over everything else and requiring tons of energy, and we're going to call that excessive, or it's all crinkled. And this is what it looks like to me when I see other people's energy. It looks all crinkled and dehydrated. It's wobbling as it moves. It's just very, lacks all of those natural juices of life. So if your second chakra is deficient, if it's all dehydrated and crinkled, you'll know this because you have rigidity in your life around, you have like an attitude of rigidity. The way that you live is very rigid. There might be a fear of sex, poor social skills. You might deny yourself pleasure. You might have excessive boundaries. You might fear change and have a lack of desire and passion. A lot of these words might sound similar to a lot of things we can have come up in mental health. And again, it all comes back to that second chakra of what am I fearful of? What are my beliefs about this? Where did this come from? Then if it's excessive, if it's big and bubbling and overflowing, there might be sexual acting out, sex addiction, pleasure addiction, excessively strong emotions. You might be ruled by your emotions. You might be a crisis junkie. You have poor boundaries. You invade others without that self-awareness. You use seductive manipulation. There's some emotional dependency or codependency, and then some obsessive attachment. And this is if it's way over, because in the second chakra, we haven't had these needs met. We haven't been mirrored with us how to have emotions that are healthy. There was probably even some codependency in some way, shape, or form with your family. So we're relearning all of these things about relationships. Now, if you're not in tune at all with any of those things, like if you just are like, I don't even know because I'm so numb, some physical malfunctions you can look for are anything going on in your reproductive organs, your spleen, your urinary system. If you have difficulty or any sort of sexual dysfunction, like the inability to even desire sex, for example, if there's rigidity in your body, so you're really tense, you have low back pain, knee trouble, the lack of ability to be flexible, loss of appetite, loss of desire for life, food, pleasure, all of these things are signs that your second chakra, your space of creation, is depleted. So the things that I like to do with second chakras in my client is have them figure out a way that they can be full and filled of themselves. So first chakra, we're getting grounded, we're getting rooted into all of the things we believe, all of the traditions, the cultures, the family dynamics. Here in the second chakra, we're getting full of self. And this is an interesting thing that happens in our society is we grow up never really knowing how to fill or support ourselves because everything is based on someone else's perception. And this is what the whole unlearning process is about. Everything you do, every way you behave, every truth that you have in your heart is a perception or projection of somebody else as you developed into adulthood. And so many people don't even know who they are outside of other people's perceptions of them. So a huge part of the second chakra is being full of self, really understanding how you feel and using those feelings as an emotional navigation system. I have a whole video on this back on my podcast and YouTube channel of how you use your emotions as a navigation system. Right? So we're not only aware and accepting of our emotions, but we're learning from them. We're taking direction for them. They don't have reign over our lives, but we're using them to collect data. When I feel anger, I'm saying, okay, what doesn't feel safe, good, or respectful to me in this conversation, situation, experience? And it's looking at where that anger is coming from and using it to return yourself to a place of joy, not by bypassing the feeling, but by facing it head on, using it to learn and alchemizing it into something you want. This is a huge part of the second chakra. The second chakra is looking at the people you have around you and what energy and light they're holding you in and saying, am I attached to the way they perceive me? I see this a lot with especially my hip hop artists and spiritual influencers. They get to this point where it gets distorted between where is my music, where are my creations, and where did I evolve and let all of my fans and community start to mold me, right? But we do this in everyday life. It can come from likes on social media to negative comments from family members. It can come to little nudges or subtle energy shifts in a conversation. You can pick up on all of these things, especially if you had distortion in your first chakra, your ability to be rooted here on the earth. You start to pick up all of these different perceptions of other people and form your identity out of it. So we have to step back. And that's why we ask the questions in the first chakra. What belief am I rooted into? Is this even mine? What do I desire and what belief matches that desire? And can I start to root into that belief? And then we come up to the second chakra, and can I cultivate an identity within myself that has that belief, but is not based off of the perception of other people? So that as you're moving forward in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chakra, you're coming from a place of authenticity, rooted into yourself and your own beliefs, full of yourself, understanding and honoring of your own sensations and emotions and this bigger part of the human experience, right? I said in my intro to the chakras last week that all of these different things, all of these different chakras and energy centers form the way that we see, view, witness the world. So they all build upon each other. And so it's in asking these questions and looking at what data you're collecting and then projecting onto your reality that's going to help you start to create your own personal reality. Right? It's this beautiful system. It's deeply empowering. And it can also be scary as hell. It can be scary as hell to know that you have all of the answers to create the life of you want, to create the kind of life you perceive within you, because then it is up to you. But the cool part is, as we move through this system and as this ability to cultivate a sense of self, where we ultimately become to get to is a state of oneness. And that's what happens up at the seventh. And I won't jump ahead, but I want you to know that all of this work, all of this grief, all of this heartache, all of this truth telling, all of this unlearning and shedding and being reborn again and again, even though at times it feels maddening and exhausting, it gets you to the most beautiful place. It gets you to a place of oneness and embodied divinity. And I'm not talking about the divinity that we all are, that's all magical and whimsical up here, but it's an embodied divinity, so that as you walk and talk and show up on this earth, you do so in the deep knowing that whatever is truth, in the deep knowing that presence is where love and magic exist. It gets you to a place of deep inner peace, the ability to show up in heart-centered love, because it is innately within you to look out at the world and only see love, because you realize everyone and everything is a reflection of who you are and how you perceive. as you move through this system and start to witness the data that you're collecting from the world and the imagery that you are projecting onto your reality, you'll realize that what I'm giving you through this information are beautiful tools, paintbrushes, colored pencils, crayons, all the things you need to paint the most beautiful, magnificent life. And it does require getting messy. It requires coloring outside the line and not having a certain rhythm or way or timeline to do so in, but letting it unfold within and through you as you're courageous enough and brave enough to face these parts of yourself and ask these hard questions. I'm telling you this so that you know there is a reason to keep going, to keep moving, to keep building, to keep creating. And when these questions get hard to ask, tune into that knowing and feel held, supported, and loved universally. Today, when I release the meditation that goes along with this second chakra teaching, I just want you to allow yourself to deepen in to that fullness and knowing of all that you are. Really breathe life into that part of yourself. And I'll see you next week as we explore the third chakra and bring some fire and passion into our lives. I love you guys so much. Thank you for being here. As always, breathe deep and plan on miracles.